Okay, so I think Rebel was having some issues. So here he is. 1 second, please. Sorry, guys. I hope it works now. So I will say the block height while we wait. Okay, so Rebel, I think I sent you the invite to be the host. Let me know. And so block height is 861 5. Well, new block 589. I'm trying to give Rebel the ability to speak. I don't know how it's called here. Yeah. There. You should be able to see it now. And so yeah, I think. Hey, Rebel, welcome.
Hey Flo, how's it going? Yeah, finally. Sorry, that was weird. It's just it's like being in a room full of people and no one's speaking. So yeah, how are you? You okay?
Yes, I'm good. I'm good that technology isn't winning us today. We're achieving this.
We're still here, Flo, still fighting. So it's good to be back after a very peaceful week without Twitter, and it's lovely. It's been absolutely wonderful. But obviously good to get back into talking about the amazing Bitcoin art.
Were you completely offline this week?
Yeah, just did not touch anything. Deleted Telegram, deleted everything, and just had a wonderful time in the countryside, and that was it really. So yeah, I highly recommend it for people. So I feel much more refreshed now.
Nice. That's a very, very good detox.
Definitely, and missed your amazing conversation as well last week. I did catch it with Fred. I know he's in the audience as well today, so just going to say that was awesome. And as a comic book geek, I was gutted to like not be part of that conversation, but we'll do it some other time. And you guys had an amazing conversation as well, so it was really really cool. And Skylar as well, who was contributing as well. I think it was really really interesting. So that was awesome.
Yeah, we had a good time. We missed you though, so we have to repeat that one. We have to repeat all of the in the future the ones that we have missed, like you and me. Maybe do a re-editions of those.
Yes, the old, yeah, yeah. It's like a remastered edition or something like that. But it'll be great, and yeah, definitely do that sometime in the future.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give an introduction to our guest today. This is a very special episode because we have Kudzai Kutukwa, which I hope I pronounced right, and it's interesting for me because he's a writer in the space. He has written lots of articles for like Bitcoin Magazine and other articles. He also helped me write about my art more than once, and that was so I'm so thankful for that because words doesn't come easy to me. I'm more of an image person maybe. So that and it was a very very cool experience to like see what he would like feel or how he would describe the art. It was very cool. I really recommend it if you can like play with words or with other people's perspectives. It was it both. I think it was both 2 times a very good experience. But he's also an entrepreneur. He has done many things. So now we're gonna learn more about it. Hey, Kutsai, how are you?
Hey Flo, how are you doing? And good evening to everyone else in the space. Pleasure to be here.
Good evening. So I want to start like, can you
Oh,
please
it's
give?
evening my end.
Huh?
Good afternoon I'm saying it's evening on my
Yeah, we're all over the world.
end.
Could you
Yeah.
start like giving like how would you introduce yourself and yeah, maybe start with how did you like discover Bitcoin and yeah, and we can get into the creative later.
Okay. Thank you again, Flo. As Flo said in her introduction, my name is Kudzai Kutukwa, and you pronounced it correctly. And I'm a Bitcoiner. Been in the Bitcoin space. Well, I first heard about it around about 2013, and I don't know what I was doing. I randomly came across a white paper online. I read it. 90% of it didn't really make much sense to me at the time, but I walked away with one thing in mind, that this is talking about a tool or a monetary system that would separate, or at least that would give you money that is not controlled by the government. And because like I'm based in Africa, in South Africa, and I'd lived in other African countries where they've experienced currency collapses. To me, this wasn't an abstract thing about the dangers of fiat money and how it can be manipulated and how fast things can go south. So I had like a total working experience. So now coming across that white paper where you're seeing a solution, which, as I admitted at the time, I didn't really fully understand, it instantly made sense to me. And well, to the best extent possible, that is, with the 10% that I understood. So yeah, I started to kind of try and get as much content about it, learn about it as much as I could. At the time, there weren't many Bitcoiners where I was based, and it was really a very novel concept, especially given the fact that a lot of people were used to the idea that for anything to be called money, it has to come from the government, and that the government has to be in control of it and in charge of it. Otherwise, it cannot be money. Prior to that, when 2008 happened, um, I kind of, again, caught wind of that because I was relatively interested in financial markets from a very young age, or as long as I can remember, let me say. And 2008 just never made sense for me. And I walked away with the feeling that part of the reason why this had happened was really because of the fact that there's too much corruption in the system. And at the end of the day, no matter what happens, the big guys will always get a bailout, whilst everyone else has to find their own way. So these are kind of I would say, the background experiences that shaped my coming to Bitcoin, and that shaped even my present day understanding of it, to get to a point where the one thing that drives me, the one thing that I actually find interesting about it, is the core idea that you can actually transact, first of all, with no third party, and this is money that doesn't come from the state. And subsequently to that, when I started my business, which was basically, or which is basically crop insurance for your smaller farmers, again, you come face to face there with some of the failings and some of the ways that the fiat system doesn't work. So at every point, or let me say at major turning points in my life, I was confronted with the reality of just how much fiat money doesn't work, how exclusionary it is, as well as the fact that there are a lot of people at the time who were talking about financial inclusion, and there were a lot of funds that were going around talking about supporting entrepreneurs or trying to bring financial inclusion. But at the end of the day, you always came back to the same place. You're trying to solve a problem from within the system that created the problem, which never really works. So these are just what I would say as a kind of a brief introduction, the touch points that launched me into the Bitcoin space. Yeah.
Very cool. I would love to hear more about how did you start writing, or was it something that you always did? Like, how is it to be part of, like, co-founding this your business, but also
hmm
keeping this creative side of yours super alive, and always, like, you're, what I see is that you're always writing for things that are happening. Like, you're looking around a lot. Have a lot of curiosity, I would say. So yeah, how?
Oh, thank you. Well, that's a great question. I would say I've always enjoyed writing from, again, a very early age. It was something that I used to, particularly creative writing, I used to do it for fun. And I used to enjoy the process, reading and writing, and just trying to find out and learn more about the world as much as I could. And just to try and make sense of things that didn't really make sense. So I used to read a lot and poke around a lot and just ask a lot of questions. And that would always lead me into different quote unquote conspiracy theories and different arenas which normally the average person wouldn't be interested in, or in questions that seem pretty obvious, but nobody can really answer. Case in point, the most famous question that I believe everyone here perhaps now has an answer to: what is money? Right? Prior to coming into Bitcoin, it seems pretty obvious the answer, at least you think you know what the answer to that is. But the more you learn, the more you realize that no, actually, our understanding, or at least my understanding of what money was very flawed, and it was basically based more on the, what I would say, the flawed economics, Keynesian economics that we learn in school at one point or the other. So that writing has always been something I just did, for fun. I just kept that thing alive from as early as I can remember. And whenever I would notice something, I would always write it down. It's really my way of remembering things. Whenever someone says something significant or have a very significant experience as a way of kind of remembering it, I like to keep like a record of things in written form. So that's just kind of how I like to organize information. And as I was now getting to dive deeper and deeper into the Bitcoin space, it's something that I noticed that there were many voices that were talking about Bitcoin and writing about Bitcoin from a specific angle, which was cool, right? At the end of the day, everyone has their talent, everyone has their angle, everyone has a specific way that they understand the world and they look at things. But I believe that my lived experiences and the intersection of things that I got to see, case in point, what I've already mentioned about having lived through currency collapse personally, and the work that I currently do with farmers, where you come face to face and you actually see the realities of how money just doesn't work for everybody. And also understanding certain, to the best extent possible, how everything just sort of fits in with, say, some of the geopolitical situations we find ourselves in our world. And I felt that there was a way to combine all of these stories and sort of try to tell them the best extent possible, and to also try to bring another dimension from my part of the world, which might be different from other people's lived experiences depending on which part of the world that they're in. So that was kind of, or that's kind of my inspiration, where my writing inspiration comes from, and what actually drives it, where I'm always on the lookout, I'm always reading a lot, and I'm always asking, talking to a lot of interesting people, and as much as I can, and just trying to learn as much information possible. And then to try and tell some of these difficult stories, or to try and just tell some of these, to go into these deep areas where maybe it's not being covered as much, or maybe there are not enough people, at least, who are in that space that have had a lived experience that is similar to mine. So I just sort of started to channel that. And then, yeah, that's kind of how I ended up, in my spare time, whenever I can, pick up a pen and write stuff that I feel will be relevant to talk about at that particular point in time.
Yeah, I think that's very necessary to something that it's also like a very beautiful contribution to the space. And what I've noticed, just like scrolling through like your articles and all of that, it's that many of these articles are not focused on technical aspects. Maybe, I mean, I see some that are, but many of these are really focused on the culture.
Yes.
So I guess you have an interest on what the culture we are maybe generating as Bitcoiners, or yeah, how would you put it? Because I struggle with this idea. I was talking with someone the other day, and the conversation was more or less like, can we give shape to this culture, like um put it in the quote unquote right path, or the path we want to, or are we just
Hmm.
a product of our culture, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, I would love to hear more your thoughts on yeah, on this idea and Bitcoin culture in general.
Well, that's a great question. Um, Here's my thought, or here are my thoughts when it comes to culture and why. I'll start off by just talking about why I tend to focus on culture a lot. The technical aspects of Bitcoin. There, I believe, many writers in the space that talk about that side of things that do a better job at it than I could ever do. And I also realize that at the end of the day, um, it's a it's an arena that I've written about, that I'm capable of writing about, but I see it as right now we have a lot of non-technical people that are also, coming into the Bitcoin space. So a lot of that stuff, at least from my own experience, whilst it's important and definitely needs to be written about, but the majority of people, they don't understand it. And whenever I try to write about it, I always try to simplify the technical aspects to make it as easy to understand as much as possible. But when it comes to the cultural aspects of it, as you pointed out, culture is something that everybody has. No matter where we all come from, we all have a particular culture that shaped how we think, that shaped our language, that shaped our family traditions, etc., etc. So the one thing that we never really, at least from my perspective, that I never had explored prior to coming into the Bitcoin space and acquainting myself more with Bitcoin was how money shapes culture and how money shapes our interactions with each other as human beings, not just from a financial perspective, but even from a social perspective, and how financial systems over time have evolved out of the social systems that pre-existed or that had existed before a financial system had been set up. Like, for example, in a typical family or in a small tribe, bartering things is very easy. When you're like 6, 8 people, it's very easy to barter. But the more you add more and more people to that, it becomes a very complex and complicated process. So there's a need now for a medium of exchange or something to come into play that will help facilitate trade in that specific ecosystem, or you might say tribe, as it grows. And the culture of that tribe, and this is what I found interesting and something I'd never explored prior, was how then, when a monetary system starts to evolve, whether by design or by default, how the culture starts to also change with regards to that monetary system, or how the culture impacts that monetary system, how these two things become sort of interrelated. And over time, as the monetary system grows and evolves, you also can have a correlation between how also the culture grows and evolves. Whenever, for example, whenever you have a depression or recession or any bad economic time, it has a terrible effect on families, it strains families, stresses, it has a negative impact on the family structure, generally speaking. And it also impacts how people start to behave and react and act and all of these other things. You start to witness, more of what in economic terms would call high preference or high time preference behavior, where it's all about survival. So you immediately go into survival mode. So it then becomes a culture, or at least whether temporarily or for the long term, this culture where there isn't any long term thinking or long term planning. If this goes on for long enough, that becomes permanently ingrained in the psyche of the people where everybody's just living for today and there isn't any sort of futuristic planning or trying to take into account what the future might look like because you're using a broken monetary system that makes it impossible or at least very difficult to try and align those stars as it were. So the long and short of it is what I try to bring to my writing when I focus on these different cultural aspects is to try and expose some of these areas and these things that, because culture is a very broad topic. It's a very broad area. It covers multiple things. And I mean, a lot of people on the spaces right now are artists, and artists have a different way of looking at the world. They have a different way of interacting with the world than, let's say, scientists would. So these, I would say, are what you could call different cultures, and the way they would approach something or the approach to money in general might be different based on what the priorities are and what the long-term goals of each different group of individuals would be. So this is basically what I try to focus on and try to even explain and break some of these things and hopefully leave a map for the people that are going to come into the space and also help other people that are already in the space to understand what this Bitcoin thing is really about, at least from my perspective.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating, Kudzai. And I particularly like. I've had fun in the very limited time I've had on the internet this week, uh, reading your articles as well. And one article in particular that I thought was fascinating is the Bitcoin cinema, and in there you talk a little bit about how Bitcoin and sound money. Affects culture and therefore affects the generation of art and how people celebrate that. I think I can't remember the exact quote, but hard money lifting or causing a period of enlightenment, very much in the same way as the Renaissance, reliving the Dark Ages. Um, can you just give a quick kind of overview of that article to the audience, because I think it's really interesting because there's a lot of crossovers between not just uh, cinema but other arts as well, and how important do you think Bitcoin is in kind of having this almost like this new renaissance as well?
Okay, interesting question. And thank you for the compliment. I truly appreciate it. Well, there is going to be a follow up soon to that specific article you mentioned, because obviously there's a limitation to how many words you can put in at a time. I wouldn't want to write a book when I'm writing an article. But to just give you a quick overview, what I was trying to explain and I think highlight with that piece was, again, to piggyback off of the previous question, the extent to which money shapes culture, and particularly when we are talking about specific art form, right? Because you have a scenario where a lot of, particularly if you look at the film industry, there's a lot of centralized points within it in terms of who determines what movie gets made or not, and some of the themes that are in certain, whether it's movies, TV shows, you name it. Just the entire process and how there's a lot of what you would call dictation insofar as certain scripts and hello, can you still hear me?
Yeah, yeah, we're here.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, it sounded like it had dropped a bit. Anyway, so I was just trying to make the point that there are a lot of scripts that, for the most part, don't make it to the big screen or small screen. Not necessarily because they are bad, but certainly because they are uncomfortable or they challenge certain prevailing narratives, which at that point in time may be hot topics that are quote unquote off limits. Now, who then makes that decision of whether something gets made or not? Usually, the people that are able to finance or fund these specific projects, or people that own the specific pipeline. Think of your content distribution platforms like YouTube and Netflix, right? So at the end of the day, what I was basically just trying to highlight and showcase within that piece was, at least from a cinematic experience perspective, is the extent to which sometimes we don't realize how that sort of fiat money culture also translates into even how we make movies and the kind of stories that we get to tell. Because at the end of the day, these stories are either being sponsored by someone else or paid for by someone else. And whoever is